ladies and gentlemen. Hello and welcome. This is Will Tarashuk from Off the Shelf Media. I am here with Dan Kitchen, one of the founders of Activision, or working with the founders of Activision. So, Dan, thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy day here in Long Island. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you so much for coming.
So, tell us about the story, Activision, one of the biggest names in games. Tell us that story, how you were working there, what you did, and what you're doing now.
Well, our co-founder, my partner, David Crane, was co-founder of Activision, and he started it with three other gentlemen who left Atari, who really wanted to just get credit for the games that they created, and they became the first third-party publisher of video games. He created Pitfall, Pitfall 2, Laser Blast, Grand Prix, Fishing Derby, Freeway, a number of games. My brother Gary Kitchen and I were on the East Coast making games. My brother Gary did Space Jockey, Donkey Kong for the 2600. We were doing Apple games at the time, and in 1981, we joined Activision and became part of their company as the Eastern Design Center. At Activision, we did Keystone Capers, Pressure Cooker, Crackpots, Ghostbusters, Akari Warriors, Kung Fu Master, a number of very popular games. Through the years, we've all been in the game industry, and now, 40 years later, we are making brand new games for the Atari 2600 under the Audacity Games company.
It's crazy. Something like the Atari games, all the games you just mentioned, the longevity, the life, is the fact that you can walk around here, see people playing games from 1980s before I was even born.
Right.
So what makes you think, what keeps that love, that passion, and people keep coming back? Like over here, you got a child, maybe 9, 10 years old, playing an old original Game Boy. What keeps this old types of video games alive here in 2025?
You know, we had very small room in the cartridges, in the programs, and we had to really make games fun. So we didn't have big stories and big graphics and a lot of the things that you see in games today. We had to really make a game have the essence of fun and replayability. And I think with the nostalgic craze of people loving the 80s, they want to go back to their childhood and relive the times that they play games. And what we try to do is we are recreating the Activision of old. Our games come in a cartridge, in a box with a cartridge, a color manual, and many people have said it's like I'm opening my Pitfall in 1982 on Christmas morning when I get your new games.
It's a big conversation in video games. It's like AAA games are all the same. And it's like, okay, but in my opinion, there's never been a better time for video games because there's so many options, indie developers, people leaving the big studios, making the small studios. So how do these small studios compete, find their niche, and really find success in this industry that is billion-dollar industry?
It is a billion-dollar industry, but it's so hard right now because there are so many companies that are laying people off. Their AAA games they put millions and millions of dollars into do not sell well. And, of course, the advent of the iPhone and other platforms that sell games for 99 cents or free with in-app purchases, it's very hard as a developer to make your revenue back once you put money into a game. But if a studio focuses on a niche gameplay mechanic, I always go back to Angry Birds. You know, if I sat in a room by myself with rubber bands, I would eventually start flicking them at things, and that's really what Angry Birds is. You had the fun mechanic of flicking the birds and seeing them fly through the air. So I would encourage small studios, indie studios, to make a game with a fun mechanic that's replayable, that people like to go back and play, and just focus on that, and then create games for platforms like Steam and maybe the Switch that they may be able to make their revenue back.
Do you have a mechanic you wish they would bring back? Like for me, it's definitely turn-based combat. I've been playing a lot of the old Final Fantasies 1, 2, I'm about to start 3, and it's the turn-based combat is such a refreshing mechanic. This is a different strategy style, and I know there's a new game, the French publisher is turn-based combat, but any other kind of mechanic you wish games would bring back?
You know, I'm actually right. I'm in your ballpark. I think turn-based combat is the best, and I would like to see that done more in modern games.
Yeah. And then finally, I want to touch upon game preservation. Like, it's not easy to, even cartridges, the battery dies and you can't save them. I remember like my original Pokemon Blue.
Sure,
I can play it, but I can't save it because the battery died and just doesn't work anymore. So where are your stance in terms of how to properly preserve games, whether it's emulation, internet archives, or what's the best way to actually preserve video games from old?
You know, it's very tough. I work for the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas, and we're all about preservation. And the hardest thing we find is people, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, were playing a lot of online games that now, since the servers are gone, they can no longer play the games. So I would encourage people to find games that they love in physical form and preserve them. And anything they may have when they're done with, donate to places like the National Video Game Museum, because we create a library and a base for players from generations to come and see these products and actually play them hands-on to know what it was like in the early days of the video game business.
Well, me personally, I still have my PS2 as my first system outside of a Game Boy, which I still have as well, the Game Boy Color. I don't know if it works, but I still got it. So a big part of games in general is the graphics and the gameplay. And as a developer, you have to find that balance. And with a lot of games running on the same engines, they kind of have that same look and feel. So you as a developer, as someone who's been there before, how do you kind of find that balance between good gameplay and seeing a visual like, wow, that tree looks real?
It's a challenge because with the modern systems, a lot of companies and designers put a lot of reliance on their graphics and their storytelling and don't really work on the gameplay essence. In the old days, all we had was 8-bit pixels. So we really had to make the game fun with the very limited graphics that we had. For instance, on the Atari 2600, there is no graphics area, there's no graphics memory. So we have to create the graphics as the raster goes down the TV screen 60 times a second. But I would encourage, again, it goes back to gameplay mechanic. And one thing I do find is when you're creating a game as a programmer, you play it continually and bug test it every time you put a new change in. At the moment that you go back and you want to play the game without wanting to test or having to test for bugs, it's at that point you've put in the intangible bit of fun. And I would encourage developers, even of AAA games, to make sure that they focus on the fun aspect and continually to tweak the game until they want to go back and continue to play it without bug testing. And then they'll realize that they put in that little intangible piece that makes people want to go back and play over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. The replay value is huge. I can't tell you how many games I've played, maybe 60, 70, 80 hours. Once I'm done with it, I'm like, I'm never, ever touching that again. But you see these old retro games, I'll still play Pokemon Blue.
Right,
it's a quick 40-hour experience.
Can't save it.
Yeah, but you can't save it, exactly. Dan, appreciate your time. Thank you
so
very
much.
much. This was a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Shelf Media. I'm Will Tarashuk. We'll be back next time. We'll see you there, but until then,
Thanks, guys.
y'all take care.